Amazing farmer reveals the transformative truth about the unexpected blessing of a hungry widow. Jack stared down the long dusty rows of his once vibrant cornfield, the wilting stalks whispering a grim reminder of what had been. 2 decades of sweat, heartache, and sacrifice lay buried in the cracked soil before him. The vibrant green had faded to a dull brown under the sun's unyielding gaze, just like the hopes of the small Midwestern town that was his lifeblood. As bills piled up and whispers of a corporate developer began to circulate, Jack's heart sank deeper into the quagmire of despair. This was his legacy crumbling before his eyes, his children's heritage slipping away. The weight felt suffocating, a tightening noose around his thoughts. What would happen if he lost everything? At the diner that day, he felt the heaviness press against him like a thundercloud. The familiar chatter was replaced with hushed voices, murmurs of worry, and the occasional nervous laughter. As he sat at the counter nursing a cup of black coffee, guilt surged through him for even seeking respite. Suddenly, a new face broke his contemplative trance. Helen was there, a widow with 2 young children. She held herself with a quiet grace, yet her eyes danced with veiled pain. It intrigued him, and Jack found himself drawn to her despite feeling the weight of judgment from other patrons. He hesitated for a moment before initiating conversation, unsure how his troubles resonated with hers. "How's the adjustment?" he asked, the question heavy with unspoken empathy. When she spoke of mounting loan bills, Jack's pulse quickened. Here was another struggling soul, and somehow it made his own fears feel more immediate, more tangible. They swirled around him, questioning his ability to hold on to his farm, his identity, his worth. Before they delved deeper, an unsettling thought flickered through his mind. How could he possibly help her when he was barely keeping his own head above water? The pressure rose like steam in the air, making him clench his jaw. She spoke of cooking with her grandmother, tales that filled her voice with color. Jack felt himself captivated, wanting desperately to hear more while grappling with the gnawing urge to pull away. Was he ready to embrace something new when everything felt precarious? Before we continue, he suddenly remembered the weighty distraction of the outside world pressing at the edges. I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the words slipped from his mouth, he wanted to kick himself. Why was he holding on to trivial distractions? With each passing moment, the stakes seemed to elevate. He felt her draw closer without an invitation. What if organizing a community meal wasn't just a distraction, but a lifeline for them both? Yet the thought of facing neighborly scrutiny, a collection of opinions instead of understanding, wrapped around his heart like barbed wire. He could practically hear the whispers, feel the judgmental stares. Would they see Helen as a charity case, or as someone beneath the surface, just like him, fighting to survive? A dark thought niggled at him. Could this meal mean risking everything? What if the corporate developer's eyes found them through these planned interactions? Jack clenched his fists, feeling the desperation creep in. Dread clawed at him fiercely, a grim reminder that life was not only about him anymore. He stood at the precipice, and the horizon ahead seemed to offer nothing but uncertainty. The truth lay heavy. Was he capable of sacrificing what little he had left to support this brave, unexpected connection? Or would fear silence his urge to fight for something more, something worth believing in? As he left the diner, the weight Jack felt was amplified by the biting breeze that swept through the empty streets. His boots crunched on the gravel, echoing his uncertainty, and a desperate thought clawed at his mind. Was it worth risking what little he had left for Helen? He shook his head, willing away the creeping doubt. Each step took him past farmers attempting to salvage the last dregs of their harvest, their faces reflecting his own struggle. Their silent nods felt like questions. Would he stand with them, or retreat into the shadows of his fears? Jack arrived home with the sun dipping low in the sky, casting sharp silhouettes against the fields. The vast expanse he had dedicated his life to now loomed like a daunting specter. Inside, he found the remnants of his children's laughter, Their favorite toys lay strewn about, juxtaposed against the encroaching silence of a failing farm. He caught sight of a picture on the wall. Their family, united and smiling, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within him. He remembered Helen's resilience, the way she talked about survival with a fierce compassion. What did it say about him if he allowed fear to dictate his choices? The thought of organizing a meal, a simple gathering, spiraled into something bigger, a potential spark of hope for both of them and others like them. But could he put himself on the line? The pressure in his chest tightened, suffocating in its intensity. Reaching for his phone, he hesitated. He could call her, ask if she might consider partnering on this idea. But then the familiar dread froze him in place. What would she think? Would she see him as just another man grasping for a lifeline? That fear suddenly felt bigger than any loss he had faced in the past. The thought puzzled him. Ultimately, he was an experienced farmer, equipped for toil and labor. Yet here he was, paralyzed by a single interaction. The evening dragged on, each passing minute magnifying his internal wrestling match until he could no longer resist. He pulled out a notepad from the desk, staring at its blank spaces. He began to write down a plan for the meal. What if he could reach out for help in his own way? He envisioned tables under faded party lights, the smell of food wafting through the air, laughter cutting through silence. Could the act of sharing a meal act as not just nourishment, but healing? But then the biting shadows of doubt crept back in. A meal? Organizing something amid worry and judgment from the townsfolk? They would ask questions, expect things of him, and scrutinize what little he had left. Would they see the task as a desperate plea, or interpret it as a plea for solidarity in the face of shared hardship? His teeth clenched. He would burst to flames or wither away. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Jack jumped, caught off guard, his heart racing as he approached the door. Who could this be at such an hour? As he opened it, he was met with the warm smile of Helen standing on his doorstep. "I was hoping we could talk about that meal," she said, the sincerity in her voice cutting through the heaviness like a sudden ray of sunlight. Jack's heart raced, and a potent mix of hope and fear filled the air around them. It was now or never. Would he take this leap alongside her and face the judgment, the whispers that loomed just as darkly as the clouds above? Or would he retreat back into the shadows, risking not just a connection with her, but the pain of regret for what could have been? The moment of truth was here, and he could no longer hide behind uncertainty. The light from the porch illuminated Helen's face, transforming the lines of worry into something softer. Jack stood frozen at the threshold, grappling with a turmoil that demanded resolution. Helen's eyes sparkled not just with the hope of a potential gathering, but with the promise of partnership, a connection built on shared burdens. "As I was saying," she continued, oblivious to his hesitation, "a meal could mean more than just food. It could be a symbol of community, a chance for people to come together and share their stories. I was thinking we could showcase local dishes, maybe even involve some of the folks from the diner." Her enthusiasm clashed with Jack's apprehension as his mind echoed the shadows of doubt. Was he truly ready for this? They could do it together, but there was so much that could go wrong. What if no one came? What if it turned into a spectacle? "I like the idea," he finally replied, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. "But what happens if—" He couldn't finish the thought, the fear stifling his voice. "What if no one shows up?" Helen offered, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "We can't let fear dictate our next steps. You know that better than anyone." The truth of her statement struck him like a lightning bolt. His life had revolved around cultivating the land, nurturing the crops through droughts and storms. The effort had not always resulted in bountiful harvests, but surrendering to despair was never an option. And yet here he was, paralyzed by anxiety over what might not be. Jack took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs and clear the haze of doubt. It dawned on him that Helen's urgency mirrored his own. They were both searching for something more than mere survival. And this meal could serve as a turning point, a chance to redefine their existence, wrangling with the fragile state of hope and desperation. "I have an idea," he said slowly, words forming with increasing certainty. "We could set a date, maybe next week, or even sooner. We can ask around at the diner for help. If we each bring a dish, we could showcase what everyone has left. A flicker of excitement danced in Helen's eyes. Yes, we could create a menu, something everyone can relate to. And if we pair that with a story, the history behind those dishes, people will connect more deeply. A spark ignited within him, the fear beginning to dissolve. This wasn't just about food, it was about reclaiming connection in a time when it felt utterly lost. They discussed logistics, jotting down plans, gathering local recipes, and formulating a list of people who might join them. As they talked, something shifted within Jack. He began to see beyond the shadows, beyond the stoic walls he had built around his heart in self-preservation. Organizing a meal was not merely a risk, it was an invitation to those around him to confront their own adversities together, to share their burdens and fears, to create something meaningful amid uncertainty. But as they wrapped up their conversation, a new wave of reality crashed over him like the rattle of thunder. He would have to face not just potential support, but also the critical eyes of neighbors, the whispering judgments of townsfolk who had known his struggles for years. Could he withstand that pressure? Jack leaned against the doorframe, looking out at the distant fields. What came next would require more than preparation. It demanded vulnerability, the willingness to expose the fissures in his armor. Turning back to Helen, he could feel the weight of their shared mission settle on his shoulders, a mantle he now willingly accepted. "Let's do this," he said, determination threading his words. But he couldn't avoid the gnawing questions, the dawning realization that their efforts would ripple far beyond the meal itself. What would happen when the wall surrounding his heart crumbled, revealing his fears and insecurities? Would the community rally together, or would they turn their backs? The time had come to confront the unknown, the mingling of hope and anxiety spinning in his gut. Helen's smile only made the contrast sharper, something to be protective of that now asked for more than just the act of sharing. It demanded courage for what lay ahead. Would he truly risk everything for the chance to connect? Jack took a step forward into the murky territory of transformation, a silent promise hanging in the air. His search for strength was just beginning. The sun peeked over the horizon, stretching its amber rays across the fields, but Jack's head was still heavy with the weight of the conversation. Every step toward the diner felt monumental, as if each footfall was a deliberate choice to embrace a new path. The air was thick with potential, yet his heart raced, half exhilaration, half dread. As he entered the diner, the familiar smells washed over him, but they felt different today, laden with gravity. Tables and chairs were set in their usual places, but he could sense the looming presence of his insecurities. They clung to him in the form of judgment from the townsfolk. What would they say about his plan? Would they dismiss it as another of his misguided attempts to restore something that didn't exist anymore? Seating himself at the counter, he greeted Betty, the waitress, with a weathered smile. "Hey Jack, you look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." "Just planning a meal," Jack replied, unsure how to articulate the magnitude of what he intended. "A meal?" She laughed softly, her voice a musical blend of warmth and skepticism. "That's one way to bring life back to this place. What kind of meal?" Jack paused, uncertainty creeping back in. "A local feast, a way for everyone to share what they've got left, stories and all." Betty regarded him with an intensity that made him squirm. "Are you sure you can handle that? It's a big step up from working the fields." He bristled at the challenge in her tone. "I've faced bigger challenges than a few empty chairs at a dinner table." The words surprised him, carrying an unexpected weight. "Prove it then," she said, a hint of encouragement surfacing beneath the challenge. The jibe acted like a match to his fuse. Jack realized he didn't just want to pull this off for the community, he needed to reclaim his own narrative. Driven by a rush of clarity and defiance, Jack made a mental list of everyone he needed to inform about the plan. He took out a crumpled piece of paper and began jotting down names. Old friends, acquaintances, neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years. Each name walked into his consciousness like a reminder of buried connections. He felt a strange elation ignite within him, and for the first time, he allowed himself to visualize the diner filled with people, laughter, and the scent of home-cooked meals blending into one another. The thought made him nervous but invigorated. "What's next?" Betty asked, wiping down the counter with renewed interest. I need to talk to Helen again, he disclosed, suddenly realizing that their discussions had previously only revolved around logistics. It was time to dive deeper, to clarify why this mattered to both of them. This meal would not be just about filling stomachs, it would be about filling the void that had long gripped their town since despair became a constant companion. As he prepared to leave, doubt scratched at the corners of his mind. Should he show Helen the list? What if she thought it was too ambitious? What if it revealed too much of his own fragility? In that moment, he understood that it wasn't simply about gathering people or sharing food. It was about revealing the very cracks in his foundation that he'd avoided for years. Determined not to shy away from that vulnerability, he pushed through the door and stepped into the sunlight, letting it wash over him like a herald of change. This was his journey, unsteady, suffused with uncertainty, but nonetheless his to navigate. Jack had set the wheels in motion, but how far would he venture when faced with the reality of exposing his true self? Would this meal be the culinary bridge he envisioned, or a precarious tightrope over a gaping chasm? No longer merely a questioning participant in the fabric of his life, he was ready to weave himself back into the tapestry, threads that would either unravel or solidify the connections he desperately needed to foster. The question loomed over him like a dark cloud. Could he transform his vulnerability into a source of strength, or would the attempt lead to his undoing? The gravel crunched beneath Jack's boots as he made his way down the road toward Helen's house. Each step felt like a retreat into his past. A journey laden with nostalgia and remorse. He had not visited her in ages, and the strain of their last conversation gnawed at him. Helen had been a voice of comfort, but also a mirror reflecting his loss and inertia. As he approached her front porch, he hesitated, hand poised to knock on the door. What would he say? Would he confess his ambitions or keep them veiled, allowing her to shape the conversation? The thought unsettled him. Clarity was vital now more than ever. He knocked, the sound tapping sharply against the silence in the air. Moments felt like hours as he waited, the afternoon sun casting a warm hue over the world, but Jack felt cold inside. His heart raced, pounding against the walls of his chest, each thump echoing the urgency of his mission. When Helen opened the door, her surprise quickly gave way to a warm smile. "Jack! You actually came by," she exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Yeah, I wanted to talk," he replied, easing into the conversation, "about the meal idea." Her smile faltered slightly as she stepped aside, allowing him into her home. The comfortable clutter around her, a testament to a life filled with memories, made him feel both welcomed and overwhelmed. "I've been thinking about how we can get people involved," she said, perching on the edge of her well-worn couch. Jack sat opposite her, feeling the gravity of their shared silence before breaking it with his resolve. "I wrote a list of names," he began, pulling the crumpled paper from his pocket. "I thought maybe we could reach out to some folks. But it's about more than just food, you know. It's about getting everyone to share their stories." He unfolded the paper as he spoke, every name a brushstroke on the canvas of his vision. Helen studied the list with a critical eye, but Jack could sense she was weighing the merit of each name against the friendships and histories they carried. "You've put a lot of thought into this," she said finally, nodding, but Jack caught the flicker of skepticism in her gaze. "But do you think it's really possible? Are you ready for what comes with gathering those people again?" Her words struck at the heart of his doubts. The knot of uncertainty twisted tighter in his gut. Would they all remember the same past he did? Could the weight of their collective mourning shape this gathering into something redemptive rather than a reminder of all they had lost? "I have to try," he responded, a new conviction hardening his voice. "It's not just about them, it's about me too. I can't keep running from my past or our shared grief. We need to re-establish those connections, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." Helen's expression softened as she processed his admission. "That's a brave thing to say, Jack, but bravery looks different for everyone. Just remember, this will be as much about vulnerability as it will be about the food. It's not the act of feeding them that's important, it's what you do after." Jack felt a rush of clarity wash over him. Helen was right. Each name on that list wasn't just a call to the table. It was a call to collective healing, to confront the pain each of them carried. His discontent birthed a yearning for connection, and perhaps through that very discomfort, he might find a thread of solace. As they discussed each name, something shifted within Jack. His doubts transformed into determination, a quiet resolve replacing the tumult. A flicker of hope ignited as he imagined the faces, each with their stories entwined, sharing their burdens and joys. But lurking beneath that hope was a persistent question left unanswered in the corners of his mind. Could he bear the weight of his own story, of their stories, when the time came to face them all together? Jack stood after some time, the list still clutched tightly in his hand, and met Helen's gaze. "Thank you for listening." "Thank you for sharing," she replied, and he felt the bond between them tighten, just as it had once frayed. As he stepped back out into the vibrant sunlight, his heart lifted, but shadows lingered. Every step back down the path was weighted with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Could he embrace the forthcoming vulnerability required to truly connect? The doubt coursed through him, the challenge looming larger than ever. Would he have the strength to face those who might turn their backs on him, even after risking it all? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the pavement, Jack found himself pacing along the gravel road he had just walked down. The weight of his conversation with Helen pressed heavily on his chest, chasing away the fleeting warmth of optimism he had felt only moments before. Each step was a drumbeat, echoing his unsettled thoughts. Was he truly prepared to confront their shared grief? The anticipated vulnerability gnawed at him, a visceral reminder of the emotional terrain he would need to navigate. That night, sleep eluded him. Jack lay restless in bed, turning over the details of the list he had clutched in his hand. The names glimmered in his mind, each a potential gateway to connection, but also a reminder of his frailty. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over a few of those names, paralyzed between the urge to reach out and the fear of rejection. What if the stories they carried were too heavy to bear? What if they had moved on, leaving him in the past? The next morning, he awoke with purpose. Breakfast consumed with absent-minded bites, he felt more a soldier preparing for a battle than a man seeking reconciliation. He grabbed his notebook, flipping through pages filled with thoughts, ideas, and half-formed aspirations until he found a blank page. It was time to structure his approach. The chaos in his mind had to find order in the external world. Jack wrote down each name again, meticulously. Next to each name, he jotted down potential stories he remembered, moments he believed could resonate with mutual experiences. As he wrote, something inside him began to shift. This wasn't merely a list, it was a tapestry of souls he once shared laughter and sorrow with. He paused, pen poised midair. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. Reconnecting could act as a catalyst for his own transformation, not just theirs. He wrestled with the idea that perhaps he could guide, facilitate, or even inspire within the confines of that meal. But would they see him as a leader, or merely as someone grappling with unresolved pain? With each stroke of the pen, doubt morphed into determination. Jack found himself envisioning not only a gathering, but also a platform for shared vulnerability. The thought invigorated him. What if they could collectively recount their most honest memories, facing the specters of past losses together? Through connection might lie the path to healing, for him and for them. By the end of the day, he felt a blend of exhaustion and resolve. He had drafted messages for 3 people on that list, carefully crafted words designed to reclaim lost relationships. He took a deep breath, ready to step into the discomfort that awaited him. Each click of the keyboard echoed with his resolve, a commitment to authenticity that he desperately needed to uphold. Perhaps this was the beginning of asserting his place in a long untended web of friendships, or a step toward rewriting the narrative that had kept him shackled to a singular view of loss. But as he hit send on the last message, a fresh wave of anxiety washed over him. Would they respond? Would they even care? Jack realized this was a test, not merely of others but profoundly of himself and his ability to confront uncertainty. As the hours ticked by, he kept glancing at his phone, anticipation mingling with dread. Each notification could be a lifeline or a dagger of disappointment. Would he find his fears confirmed, or evidence of his long-held belief that he was worthy of connection? In that charged space between hope and apprehension, Jack felt the ground shift beneath him, a prelude to transformation. What lay ahead was as uncertain as the sky might turn at dusk. Just then, a vibration buzzed through his pocket, his heart leaping as he fished out the phone. One message had come through, illuminating the path forward. Jack swallowed hard, ready to confront what awaited him on the other side of that screen, unsure of the impact it might have on his journey toward rediscovery. Jack's heart raced as he unlocked his phone, the screen illuminating his face with a bright, inviting glow. The message flashed at him, a simple notification from Sarah, a name he hadn't anticipated receiving a reply from. She had been a close friend once, sharing laughter and dreams in those carefree days before everything shifted, but the shadow of grief had distanced them, and he found himself awash in uncertainty. "Hey Jack, it's been a long time. I was surprised to hear from you," the message read, a brief acknowledgement wrapped in a familiar warmth. Jack blinked, the vulnerability of opening this forgotten door prompting a swell of emotions. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, each letter an embodiment of his fear and hope. "Can we meet soon?" he typed, feeling the pressure of his own hesitation weigh heavily on him. It was an invitation to confront the past, an acknowledgement that both of them were still on the same road, albeit on different paths. As he hit send, he was struck by a profound realization. He could not approach this reunion with just curiosity or nostalgia. It had to be more than that. It needed intention, a deliberate choice to create a meaningful conversation. Jack began to visualize what he wanted to achieve through this meeting. He grabbed his notebook again, the pen scratching frantically against the paper as he mapped out possible dialogue and questions. What did he want to ask? How had Sarah journeyed through her grief? What lessons had she learned that could inspire and guide him? His mind surged with ideas, but the weight of genuine connection still felt elusive. Planning each nuance of the conversation became an obsession. Jack outlined potential scenarios, aware that each conversation carried the risk of venturing into deeper emotional waters. He questioned his capability to handle such intensity, but within that doubt, he recognized an opportunity for growth. This wasn't merely a chance to reconnect with Sarah, it was a moment to confront the specters that haunted him, his fears, regrets, and perhaps a chance at understanding forgiveness. Days passed without a response from Sarah, and Jack's anxiety crested once again. Was he pushing too hard, or perhaps his reach for connection would get him nothing but silence? That familiar sense of despair began to claw at him. What if he did not have the strength to continue if others also withheld their warmth? But rather than retreating into despondency, Jack made a choice. It was time to take action. He started reaching out to others on his list, crafting personalized messages filled with his evolving understanding of their shared experiences. Every word he wrote was infused with intent. He wasn't just trying to reconnect, but also to offer parts of himself. The vulnerable, unpolished parts of his journey that needed honesty. When responses began to trickle in, Jack felt as though he was stepping deeper into a river filled with uncertainties. Danny's reply was laced with motivations that stirred old memories alive. Meetings that previously held laughter now mirrored the shared darkness of grief. Listening to others release their burdens inspired Jack further, igniting a fire within him to share his own. Each interaction changed him, moving him closer to understanding how shared vulnerability wasn't a sign of weakness, but one of strength. As he flipped through his notes, he saw that what had begun as scattered thoughts was now a cohesive map of potential healing, not just for him, but for others willing to engage in the conversations he yearned to harness. With newfound determination, Jack scheduled a gathering, one that was not solely based on mourning, but rather a celebration of perseverance and resilience. It was his chance to curate a collective experience, each participant armed with their unique journey, poised for dialogue. As he finalized the details, a new wave of doubt washed over him. The deeper he delved into this project, the more critical it felt. What if their stories were too painful, or if he failed to create the safe space he envisioned? The echoes of concern gnawed at the back of his mind. And then, late that night, another message chimed in. This one changed everything. A familiar face from his past was eager to join him. Jack's pulse quickened, not from excitement, but from fear. The stakes were rising with each effort to bridge these distances. He realized in that moment that he was no longer just reaching out. He had taken on the role of a gardener, embracing uncertainty while planting seeds of connection, even when he felt unworthy of cultivating what he hoped might grow. But as the notification dinged for a third time, Jack felt an unsettling stir within him, holding potential repercussions he could scarcely begin to understand. What would the next message reveal? Would it solidify this unexpected journey, or threaten everything he had begun to build? The pressure of the unknown loomed over him like an ominous cloud, a testament to the dual-edged sword of vulnerability and connection. The following morning, Jack awoke to a weighty mixture of trepidation and determination. Sleep had eluded him, as thoughts swirled about the significance of the message he had received. He was now at a precipice where every interaction could lead to profound connections or painful reminders of the past. He picked up his phone, half expecting another notification that would plunge him deeper or provide some clarity. There was nothing. He took a breath, recognizing that he needed to shift his focus away from uncertainty and onto what he could control. Meetings, dialogues, and the gathering he was orchestrating, they were all within his grasp. Jack prepared a few notes about the journey he wanted to guide others on. This experience was characterized by growth, rejection, loss, and acceptance, each aspect worthy of discussion. Yet despite his extensive planning, anxiety tangled itself within the framework of his efforts. It gnawed at him that perhaps he was overstepping by trying to take on the emotional weight of others. Were people ready to engage with their grief so openly? Would they find value in his intentions, or would he come off as naive? Fueled by mixed emotions, he set out for a nearby cafe to finalize the agenda for the gathering. The rhythmic clink of coffee cups and murmured conversations enveloped him as he settled into a corner table. As he scribbled notes on a napkin, his self-doubt transformed into questions. What would he share? What had he learned that could resonate with others? Jack found himself drawn to a singular thread, strikingly simple yet powerful: authenticity. It was the realization that this journey wasn't solely about him reaching out. It was an invitation for people to share themselves. He could not armchair quarterback the heartbreaks they carried. Instead, he needed to step back and create an environment that allowed their voices to be heard, that celebrated every story in its own right, messy, raw, and filled with imperfections. Energized by the realization, Jack spent the day crafting the structure of the meeting, preparing to facilitate rather than dominate. The emphasis would shift from a one-sided narrative filled with his expectations to an open space where dialogue emerged organically. The more he planned, the clearer his vision became. By the time he returned home, he had woven his intentions into a coherent framework, a series of prompts designed to foster vulnerability while leaving room for each participant's autonomy. Yet as he was drafting a final invitation message to everyone, doubt seeped back in like an unwelcome guest. What if this wasn't enough? What if his own reflections were inadequate? Hours passed as he refined the wording, feeling himself dragged into an existential spiral contemplating his worthiness to lead this initiative. In those moments of self-reflection, he recalled his past struggles with confrontation, the snap judgments that had led him to retreat rather than engage deeply. Realizations washed over him. Embracing flaws and imperfections was part of the journey to self-discovery. With a trembling hand, he finally hit send on his invitation, feeling both lightened and burdened, as though he had crossed a threshold into the unknown. Just as he was catching his breath from the emotional storm, another message arrived, a lingering thread from his past. It was from Danny, expressing interest in joining the gathering and offering to help facilitate. The familiar name ignited a fire of hope, yet also instigated a wave of trepidation. Danny had always been the voice of reason, but with him came the haunting memories of their last significant interaction, filled with unsaid words and lingering pain. Jack pondered whether this would be a reunion of support or a rekindling of old wounds. Could he truly embrace both sides of vulnerability, his own fears mingling with the potential reckoning of their complex history? The emotional stakes were rising, and Jack was unsure if he was ready to confront what lay ahead. He sat in silence, realizing that he stood on the cusp of inviting others into his world, but he was also on the verge of revisiting his unresolved battles. Would he and Danny unravel each other's complexities, or would they draw strength from shared truths? The moment of truth arrived, signaling the inevitable exploration of their histories, a pathway laden with both peril and promise. What was he willing to face? With that question echoing in his mind, Jack braced himself for whatever unfolded next. Jack's heart raced as he mulled over the implications of Danny's response. The weight of their past loomed heavily, a specter he could not easily shake. The thought of approaching their history filled him with both anxiety and anticipation. This wasn't merely about facilitating a gathering. It was about his own potential reckoning with a significant part of his life. Deep down, he questioned whether he was simply masking his own insecurities by agreeing to Danny's involvement. Was this truly about creating a safe space for others, or was he seeking validation in their collective struggle? Jack clenched his fists, feeling a surge of determination. It was time to confront these uncomfortable truths, acknowledging that his growth lay not in avoiding vulnerability, but in embracing it. Determined to face the day, Jack set out for his routine jog. As he moved through the neighborhoods, the consistent rhythm of his feet on the pavement became a meditative escape. With each breath, he envisioned the meeting, imagining how he might integrate Danny's insights without losing control of the narrative. He focused on letting go, allowing space for others to contribute. The visualization calmed his nerves. The moments spent in physical motion gradually turned into mental clarity. He envisioned key themes emerging from the gathering: acceptance, growth, shared stories, each a step toward healing. Just as significantly, he recognized that by inviting Danny, he could harness their shared experiences. Perhaps this collaboration would breathe new life into their connection, transforming past frustration into mutual support. Returning home, he found himself caught in an internal debate. Should he address their history during the gathering, or would it be more prudent to avoid dredging up old wounds? Jack settled at his desk, scribbling notes. In exploring personal stories, honesty had to reign. He could reframe confrontation as an empowering revelation, not as an act of emotional brutality. As he refined his agenda, Jack recognized a hidden strength within himself. Facilitating this gathering wasn't merely about leadership. It was an exercise in vulnerability, poised to unveil deeper insights for both himself and others. He neared a breakthrough. The very act of stepping into the role of a facilitator required immense courage. A quite different take on confrontation than he had previously perceived. Despite his enthusiasm, doubt crept back in again, whispering fears about inadequacy. What if his own vulnerabilities overshadowed everything? He took a deep breath. This was precisely the risk he needed to embrace. It was okay to be a work in progress, to not have all the answers. Authenticity was not about perfection, it was about genuinely sharing experiences, regardless of the outcome. With newfound resolve, he opened his laptop and began responding to Danny's message. He acknowledged the tension between them, suggesting they discuss their past openly before the gathering. It would be essential to lay the groundwork so they could support others effectively, presenting a unified front rather than an unresolved conflict. The catharsis of laying bare his feelings was liberating, propelling him further into a state of readiness for whatever was to come. As he hit send, he realized that he had pushed beyond fear into action. Here was the first step toward healthy confrontation, not just with Danny, but with himself. The ghosts of the past no longer haunted him. They became stepping stones toward understanding. Yet, as he stepped back from the screen, a sensation of exhaustion washed over him. Were all these preparations enough? Would their exchanges in the coming days truly sculpt their experience into something beneficial? A message from Danny pinged almost instantly, igniting a fresh spark of uncertainty. The reply simply read, "When can we talk?" Jack took a deep, steadying breath. The conversation loomed ahead, one that was both daunting and exhilarating. The time had come to face their shared complexities. Would this lead to a reconciliation, or would old wounds reopen? With resolve trembling at his core, he steeled himself, ready to confront the past, whatever shadows it might cast. Jack stood in his dim kitchen, the faint smell of morning coffee mingling with the rising sunlight filtering through the window. Today was the day of the gathering, the meal that had become the focal point of both his hopes and fears. The clock steadily ticked, but time felt distorted. A blend of anticipation and anxiety swirling around him. each minute stretched longer as he mentally rehearsed the conversations that awaited him. With a final glance in the mirror, he straightened his spine, forcing his shoulders back. Today wouldn't just be a test of his organizational skills, it would serve as a crucible for his willingness to embrace vulnerability. No more distractions, not today. Driving to the diner where they had chosen to host the meal, Jack allowed the familiar roads to ground him. Yet, each passing mile felt heavy with the weight of unspoken stories he hoped would soon be shared. Fear clawed at him. What if his plan fell apart? What if no one connected? He pushed these thoughts away, focusing instead on the purpose that had driven him: connection. As he pulled into the diner's parking lot, he noticed the tables had been set outside, adorned with colorful tablecloths, all carefully arranged to welcome the guests. Jack stepped out of the car, inhaling a deep breath of the crisp air, ready to embrace whatever awaited him. Helen was already there, her easy smile cutting through his unease. "Jack, look at this place," she exclaimed, gesturing to the joyful chaos of people arriving, friends, neighbors, and even some familiar faces from the diner who had come as a show of support. Tentative laughter bubbled beneath the surface, a palpable sense of anticipation warming the air. Jack nodded, a lump forming in his throat as he took in the scene before him. It was real, the culmination of planning, vulnerability, and opening his heart to the unknown. There were tables laden with dishes, each representing a piece of someone's history, a collection of culinary stories woven into one gathering. Danny arrived shortly after, bringing with him an energy that diffused some of Jack's lingering tension. Their eyes met, a complex mix of emotions passing between them. They were both aware of the shared histories they carried, yet today they stood united in their pursuit of connection. Once everyone was settled, Jack took a moment at the head of one of the tables, feeling the weight of the moment envelope him. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was about to say. "This isn't just about sharing a meal, it's about sharing our stories, embracing this moment together." As he spoke, he realized he was no longer just talking about food. He was advocating for a shared journey through grief, celebration, and everything in between. The vulnerability in the air was both thrilling and terrifying, an invitation to step beyond superficial conversation and delve into the heart of their experiences. One by one, people began sharing their stories, memories wrapped around every dish. Jack nodded along, feeling the deep connections forming as laughter and tears intertwined. His heart swelled with each testament of resilience, and each time someone recounted their battle against despair, he realized that he was not alone. They were all navigating the same storm. When it was Danny's turn, Jack held his breath. They had spent years avoiding discussing their fractured history, yet he felt alive with anticipation now. "You know," Danny began, his voice a bit shaky at first, "I didn't realize how much I missed those moments with all of you until now. After everything, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters, the people we share this with." Jack felt an unexpected surge of gratitude. Danny's admission opened the door for an authentic discussion that transformed their past misunderstandings into a shared understanding. They had both wrestled with pride and pain, yet here they were, laying the groundwork for healing. That single moment felt monumental, a binding thread leading toward a hopeful future. Jack then felt inspired to share his own story, recounting not just the pain of loss, but the courage he had unearthed in seeking reconnection, in reclaiming his narrative. As the conversation flowed, the boundaries that had once existed began to dissolve, replaced by a nurturing atmosphere that allowed others to speak their truths. Jack saw the community come together, a tapestry of perspectives woven into one potent narrative of perseverance. By the end of the day, as laughter echoed around them and the taste of shared stories lingered in the air, Jack felt lighter, not just for the role he played as a facilitator, but as a man who had truly risen to meet his fears. Driving home, he reflected on the day's profound moments. The gathering had not culminated in a singular achievement. Rather, it had become a living manifestation of connection, healing, and the importance of embracing vulnerability. He had taken a leap, not merely for the sake of others, but for himself. And in doing so, Jack had unearthed a deep sense of fulfillment, one rooted in newfound confidence and the realization that he held power over his own narrative. Now it was more than just a meal. It was a celebration of life, a reaffirmation that in vulnerability lies strength. Jack's heart hummed with recognition, a steady rhythm of renewed hope as he drove past those fields that had once represented despair. They were still there, but now they symbolized something different, a land where possibility flourished. Jack knew that his journey had only just begun, but he was no longer afraid. Instead, he felt equipped to embrace whatever came next, ready to continue cultivating connections, not just for himself, but for anyone who dared to share their story. And as he finally arrived home, he understood that true transformation stems from facing the uncertainties together, allowing hope to blossom anew. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment their reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. You truly understand the importance of supporting stories of personal overcoming.